Hello, on this video I'm going to show you how to get data from the database and then display on a view on a Visual Studio Model View Controller project. This video belongs to a series of videos that I'm making about Visual Studio Model View Controller and SQL database. If you want to see the other videos, go to the description of this video and I'll leave a link for the entire series there for you. So this is where I left off from the previous videos. So I'm gonna run the program and I'm gonna put some data here. And when I click on submit, it sends that data to the database. And that works just fine. But now I want a way to update this data. So let's say if I want to change the name of or change the food or change the type of animal. If I click on this link, it actually goes to page 3. But on page 3, I want to retrieve the information from the database and I want to let the user change the values. So for this video, I'm just going to retrieve the values, and for the next video, I will actually update the database. So instead of going to page 3, I want something that says, hey, I'm page 3 and this is the data that you have in the database, and enter the new information. So let's write the code for that. So right here on page 2, instead of saying go to page 3, I'm gonna type here edit the animal. And this action goes to the page 3 action on the home controller. So I'm gonna go to home controller and on the page 3, and I'm gonna delete this message for now. And then here, I want to get the animal from the database. Now the animal table has a ID and I'm gonna use that ID to retrieve the information. So here's my database. I'm gonna right click, script tables as, select to new query editor, and then if I run this, I get all the information. And then here I have the primary key of this table, which is ID. So I'm gonna use the ID to get me a row of this database. And the way I'm gonna do this is by select the information where ID equals a number. Let's say number 13 for now. So if I run this query, I will get a specific row in the database. This is the query I'm going to be using. Now back to my code, the ID is already saved on the session. Therefore, I can use the ID that I saved on the session to retrieve that data. I know I do have a zoo class inside my DAO folder, and this zoo class is where I write the code to retrieve the information from the database. Now I don't have any, so currently I do not have any function to retrieve the data from the database. I just have one to insert. So I can either type everything myself or I can let Visual Studio do that for me. So I'm gonna let Visual Studio do that for me. So I'm gonna create the objects, and then with the objects, I'm gonna call a function that doesn't exist. So this function is gonna be called getAnimal. I'm gonna pass the animal ID, which right now is a string, but I'm gonna change this to ID. So I'm gonna pass the ID on this function, and then I'm gonna receive a animal object, which happens to be the model, the animal model. So I'm calling a function that doesn't exist. Then I'm passing a parameter that I have right here, which is the ID. And then I receive a animal model as a returning type. Now, because this doesn't exist, it gives me this red squiggly. So I'm gonna hover over, then show potential fixes, and I'm gonna click on generate the method. So once I click there, Visual Studio generates the method for me. Now I'm gonna right click and go to definition, and Visual Studio created this function for me. So I'm gonna delete the implementation, and here I'm gonna do the 4 steps that I always do when querying the database. But I don't want to type everything because I already typed some of these things right here on the insert animal. So the first step is connect to the database. So because I already wrote the code, I'm just gonna copy this exact code and then I'm gonna paste right here because it is exactly the same code. All right, so the second thing to do is to create a query. So we already have somehow what we want, so I'm gonna copy that as well and I'm gonna paste right here. But instead of using this query, I'm gonna copy the query from SSMS. So I'm gonna go to SSMS and then copy this query and I'm gonna take to my Visual Studio. So I'm gonna paste the query right here. And instead of putting ID equals 13 here, I'm gonna put a @ ID. And now I'm gonna delete these two parameters and then I can change this from name to ID, and instead of putting name here, I'm gonna put ID. So this line of code is setting the parameter that I created right here. So this is a parameter, and then this is a parameter that I'm using right here, and then the ID is the value that I'm receiving as a parameter to this function. All right, now that I have my query, my next step is to actually query the database. And to query the database, it's going to be very similar to what we did before. So I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to paste right here in the query. So now I have the reader. Then I have the read to read one row. And now finally, we have some other data that we're receiving back that we need to save. But if you recall, this function must return an animal object. So right before I start retrieving the data, I'm going to create an animal object here. So animal equals new animal. So animal dot name, and I want to retrieve the name, and the name is this guy right here. So I'm going to copy and paste right here. So now I have the animal dot name equals the reader and the name. Then after that, I need the type and the food. So I'm going to put the type of the animal here, and I'm going to copy the type from the query and paste it right here. And then finally, the last one is the food of the animal. And I'm going to copy the food from the query and put it right here. So you need to make sure that whatever you're reading from the reader matches on what you querying from the database. All right, so the final step is to close the connection. So con.close, and then finally return the animal. So now this function should be done. So I'm gonna stop here for a second to show you what I have on the getAnimal function, so you can compare it to yours as well if you're following with me. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the home controller, and then at this point I have a stopper right here on line 54, and I'm gonna run the debugger because I want to make sure that whatever I'm getting from the database is actually being stored right here on the animal objects. So the name is going to be A, type A, food A, or maybe type AA and food AAA, just to differentiate a little bit. Click on submit. Now I have the link to edit the animal. I'm going to click on edit the animal, and then the stopper stopped. Now I'm going to take a look on the animal object, which is the A. I'm going to expand here, and here I see the foods, the type, and the name. So that means the animal object got the information from the database and it populated right here. All right, so this is good. So my next step is to send this object to the view so the view can display to the user. So I'm just going to put the object right here, A, and that is how I send the animal object to the view. So now I have to go to the page 3 view. So I'm going to right click and go to view. And on this view, I'm receiving the entire animal model. So I want to display the model right here. However, it's very similar to what we have on the index. So I'm going to copy this form from index, and I'm going to use that form on that page as well, with a little bit of change. So I'm going to go to page 3. And the first thing I need to do is to add the model. So add model. It's going to be the name of my project dot model dot animal. So this allows me to use the animal class. And now instead of displaying this message right here, I'm just gonna paste what I copy from the index. And it seems like Visual Studio is complaining. I don't think it likes this comment. Looks like he wants a line break. So I'm gonna put this on the next line. Yep, that makes the problem go away. Good. So I'm going to take a look on the form now. So the form is going to page 2, and obviously I want to go to a new action. So I'm going to call this action update animal. Now I don't have the update animal action yet, but I'll create in a little bit. So for now, I just want to create the form. And if I run this code right now, this form will be empty. I don't want this to be empty. I want to have the actual values from the animal models that I'm passing from the controller to this page. So because of that, I'm going to add a value here. And this value is going to be the model dot name. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other ones. This is going to be model dot type, and the last one is going to be the food. So now if I run this program, it's gonna place the values inside the input inside the form. So let's run this program to see what we have so far. All right, I'm gonna put some random data, click on submit. Now it displays the animal, and now I have a link called edit the animal. So once I click here, you go to the controller, it gets the information from the database, then sends it down to page 3 and displays right here for me. And now here, if I want to change the name, if I don't want to queue anymore, I can change to Fido and then submit and then update the database. So I do not have the action yet, but I'm going to click on submit, and it goes to the update animal action cut, and it goes to the update animal action that I don't have yet. So that's why you have a blank page. So let's create the update animal action. So right here, I'm gonna create the update animal action. So I'm gonna copy this action and I'm gonna paste right here, and then finally I'm gonna change the name from page 3 to update animal. And now I can work on this action. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna receive the animal model as a parameter, and then I have the ID from the session, and here I only have the zoo objects, but instead of getting the animal, I want a function to update the animal. Obviously, I do not have a update animal function inside the zoo class. So I'm gonna comment it out, this code, and I'm gonna delete the A here as well. So now I'm gonna put a stopper on 67, and then I'm gonna run the debugger because I wanna make sure that the animal model coming from the page is actually populated. So I'm gonna press F5 on my keyboard to run the debugger. And now I have some information here. I'm gonna put a bunch of these and then click on submit. Now I have the information. I'm gonna click on edit the animal. Now the animal, instead of D, I'm gonna put animal X now. And then when this information goes to the controller, I wanna make sure that the information is X instead of D. So I'm gonna click on submit. And then the stopper stops the code. Now I can go to take a look on the animal model. So it should be right here on locals. Then I'm going to expand the animal. And here I have the foods that the name actually got changed to X. So that means the new information that I got from the view is correct. So now all I have to do is to write the update function inside of the zoo class for this operation to be done. However, I'm going to write this code on the next video. Alright, so that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.